If you've watched any of my other videos, you won't be surprised to hear that I really enjoy breaking down systems and mechanics to find optimal ways to progress. It's always been strange, then, that I've struggled so much to get into Path of Exile. That game is just so darn complicated, even if you ignore all of the seasonal and core mechanics, meaning previous seasonal mechanics. The base game itself is not very welcoming to newcomers, to say the least. I've tried more than 5 times in the past, but ended up quitting again and again and again, never making it through Act 4. But finally, after 60 hours, I think I finally understand the appeal of Path of Exile. And all it took was a really good seasonal mechanic and stepping away from the correct way to play the game. Let me start by giving credit to Grinding Gear Games for Settlers of Kalgur. I've always been a sucker for town building mechanics in games, and this is no exception. It's a lot of fun to manage gold income versus production versus the rewards I get from shipping them off. And short of the mining segments, none of it really affects the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is very welcome for someone who is relatively new to the game. It's such a straightforward, yet deep, mechanic that doesn't force you to only interact with it alone, instead integrating across basically everything. Another thing I've struggled with is movement feeling somewhat clunky, struggling to balance attacking versus moving. Long ago, I swapped to a controller for Diablo, but never really gave it a chance with PoE. Ironically, I recently saw a lot of people complaining on the subreddit about how console users get a lot more insight and information than those on PC do. The secret is that it's only tied to whether you're using a controller or not. If you're using a controller, the game does a much better job of making sure you know exactly what's happening at all times. Displaying things like skill level up information, throwing tutorials in your face, there's a whole lot more information. So if you've been struggling with weird controls or feeling out of your depths, give a controller a shot. It doesn't solve every issue, namely movement feeling a bit weird without a dodge like in Diablo 4, but it's much more bearable. The other thing I always found daunting was this idea that you have to go and pick a build from the start and stick to it rigorously, lest you make a ton of huge mistakes and need to orb of regret your way into some drastic changes. Thankfully, Grinding Gear has made this a lot easier through 2 things. The addition of gold, which a vendor accepts in return for resetting some skill points, and an in-game trading marketplace so you no longer have to go to an external site to get your currency. Everything is automatic, you don't even have to talk to a person now. Honestly, that's great. But what really made the difference was a fundamental change in how I view the game. Who says I need to have a build from the start with the goal of tackling super hard endgame content which I've never even gotten to? Who says I have to get my build as fast as possible by farming currency so I could just trade for the gear I need to maximize my effectiveness? The thought of those 2 things alone was often enough to put me off of Path of Exile. It's a game all about loot, and trading for everything I needed always seemed to kill the entire point of the game. Isn't the fun part trying to make your build progressively better and better, and wondering what's going to drop next? If you look at the subreddit, everyone is constantly talking about the economy, trading, and how to earn the most money. In fact, there seems to be a ton of complaints from people just trying to maximize their income so they can trade for things they really want, and all of it just seems not fun. It turns out the solution to all of this is one simple thing: turning on solo self-found so that trading is completely eliminated. Then there's no need to worry about finding the best ways to earn money so I can trade for my gear, no need to worry about what's happening in the game economy, learning what the best trades are, learning how to trade on the Path of Exile website for gear, none of it. Don't need to learn anything. My biggest worry for that, however, is how I was going to manage to put together a build then. When following a build guide, you generally need very specific gear, very specific skills, everything like that. Hence why you often have to trade for these things. But with the randomness of solo self-found, you really need to be able to adapt and put together a build of your own. But especially with me being a new player, I have no idea what's good. And I certainly have no idea how to navigate the most complicated passive skill tree in the history of skill trees. I know I'm very late to the party, but this is when I discovered Poe Ninja, where I can choose my own class, swap it to SSF League, and then look at stats and heat maps to make my own build as I go. It's so much easier when there's a site showing you which passives nearly every gladiator is using. What are the most common mastery selections? Which skills do people use? Out of all of those skills, what are the options for a main skill to focus on as your main damage dealer? Which legendaries are these gladiators actually using? All of this is amazing because I feel like I can finally take my time. Feel free to explore, try out new gear and skills, and forge my own path through that passive skill tree. And when I do need particular insight, I can just pull up a few specific player builds to get an idea as to what they're doing. But ultimately, I finally feel free to discover Path of Exile by myself, without economic pressure, and without feeling completely restrained by builds or high-level players telling me what I absolutely must be doing. So if you've been on the fence, it's a really good time to give it a shot. This season is the best in a long time, which is apparently evidenced by the player retention stats compared to the previous seasons. People have been sharing that around the subreddit and Twitter. So if you want to find that, go find it. But I'm still fairly early on, only on Act 5 or 6, I can't remember which. But it's been a blast, and I'm excited to finally explore some of the previous league mechanics and finally get to this Atlas map that everyone always talks about and see what's going on up there. In the meantime, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you're feeling adventurous, leave a comment, even if it's just an emote. YouTube loves that engagement, you know. Rather than focus on a question for you, I'm going to ask a question for me. Is there anything you think I should know given everything I've just said? Do you have any tips for solo self-found? Are there any pitfalls I need to avoid? Those kind of things. Let me know. And if you want to support the channel, as always, there's a Patreon link in the description below, but no pressure. For now, though, I think that's it. I will see you next time.